Viola Davis won the Triple Crown of acting, but long before the Oscars, she was an 8-year-old girl digging through maggot-infested dumpsters just to survive. She stole food to live, and her path out seemed entirely impossible. Central Falls, Rhode Island was a brutal environment for a dark-skinned black girl living in severe poverty. Her family's apartment was infested with rats that literally chewed the faces off her dolls. Winter brought freezing nights with absolutely no heat. A deep, gnawing shame cloaked her every waking moment. Yet, sitting on a rotting floorboard, young Viola harbored a quiet obsession. She watched the television and saw a glimmer of another reality. She saw a world where people were actually seen, heard, and valued. Acting became her imaginary escape long before it became her profession. It was a desperate lifeline, a secret weapon she kept entirely to herself, waiting for the exact right moment to use it. The cruelty of her reality followed her straight through the schoolhouse doors. Hunger was a constant, vicious companion. It was not just the rumble of an empty stomach. It was a sharp physical pain that made focusing on a chalkboard nearly impossible. Viola found herself doing the unthinkable just to make it through a Tuesday afternoon. She stole from the local corner store, stuffing whatever she could grab into her pockets, praying she would not get caught. When stealing failed, she resorted to digging through the garbage cans behind the school cafeteria. She scavenged for half-eaten sandwiches and discarded fruit. The sheer indignity of it broke her spirit piece by piece. She smelled like unwashed laundry. Her clothes were heavily soiled and mismatched. Her classmates mocked her, chased her, and hurled racist insults, ensuring she knew exactly where she stood in their brutal social hierarchy. She tried to fight back to maintain some semblance of dignity, but every single day felt like a losing battle against a world that had completely discarded her. Soon, the weight of her environment crushed whatever fragile hope she had managed to scrape together. The poverty was not just financial, it was deeply physical and emotional. Her home was a chaotic war zone of domestic violence and alcoholism, leaving her with absolutely nowhere to feel safe. The adults who were supposed to protect her were drowning in their own trauma, entirely consumed by the daily terror of survival. Viola began to shrink into herself. She internalized the brutal message that she was worthless, ugly, and invisible. She stopped speaking up in class. She stopped believing the fantasies she saw on the television screen. The reality of being a dark-skinned black girl in a society that celebrated everything she was not became an unbearable weight. She spent sleepless nights crying into a dirty mattress, terrified of the rats scurrying across the floorboards. She was completely isolated by a poverty so severe it stripped away her basic humanity. But a tiny, stubborn ember of defiance still burned deep inside her. This was the absolute lowest point. There was a specific, crushing pain in realizing that nobody was coming to save her. She was a teenager wrapped in ill-fitting donated clothes, smelling of stale sweat, sitting on the rotting porch of a condemned building. The hunger pangs were so sharp, they felt like physical stab wounds in her gut. She looked around at the broken glass, the peeling paint, and the exhausted faces of her neighbors. The cold reality set in. This was supposed to be her entire life. The world had already written her story, categorizing her as a failure before she even had a chance to speak. Quitting was not just a logical choice. It felt like the only choice. Why fight a system that had so clearly, so violently, rejected her existence? She sat there in the biting cold, letting the agonizing pain of utter invisibility wash over her. She was entirely ready to surrender to the darkness that had consumed so many around her. But then, a subtle, almost accidental moment shifted the trajectory of her entire life. It was not a grand cinematic revelation. It was just a high school drama class. She wandered into that room simply because it was a place where she did not have to be herself. The teacher handed her a script and told her to read. For the very first time, the trauma, the rage, and the deep sadness that had been choking her suddenly had a designated place to go. The words on the page became a weapon. In that tiny, dusty classroom, she spoke, and people actually stopped to listen. It was a whisper of a promise. Maybe her voice possessed a power her circumstances could never steal. That tiny spark ignited a desperate rebellion. Viola decided to apply to Rhode Island College. It was a daunting leap for someone who barely had enough food to eat, let alone the money for college tuition. Her first steps into the world of higher education were painfully awkward. She was surrounded by students who had been groomed for success. These were people who spoke with confidence and possessed a fundamental sense of belonging. Viola, still carrying the deep emotional scars of Central Falls, felt like an absolute imposter. She struggled to afford basic textbooks. She worked exhausting, menial jobs just to keep a roof over her head, studying late into the night while fighting the constant anxiety of her past. It was not pretty. It was a clumsy, desperate scramble to bridge the massive gap between her reality and the impossible dream of becoming a working actor. But she showed up, day after exhausting day. She refused to let her profound insecurity force her back into the shadows. The middle of her journey was a grueling, unsexy grind that would have broken most people. She managed to claw her way into the prestigious Juilliard School. This monumental achievement quickly turned into a brutal test of endurance. She was a dark-skinned black woman from deep poverty, thrust into an elite, predominantly white institution that continually tried to mold her into something she was not. She faced early morning alarms, relentless rehearsals, and a curriculum that often ignored her unique cultural identity. After graduation, the reality of the industry hit her like a freight train. She went to hundreds of auditions, facing a massive wall of rejection. Casting directors did not know what to do with her. They offered her tiny, stereotypical roles. She was cast as the weeping mother, the background nurse, or the nameless woman in the inner city. She lived on cheap noodles, scraping by in tiny apartments, constantly questioning if she had made a massive mistake. If you have ever felt like you are pouring your soul into a dream and getting nothing but closed doors in return, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Because what she does next is the ultimate masterclass in resilience. Despite the endless rejections, she kept acting in obscure stage plays, pouring her absolute maximum effort into roles that barely paid enough for a subway token. Just as she started gaining a tiny foothold in the theater world, the crushing reality of Hollywood delivered a devastating blow. She was consistently passed over for leading roles in film and television in favor of actors who fit a more traditional standard of beauty. Even after delivering powerhouse performances on stage, she was told directly that she did not possess the right look to carry a movie. It was a profound betrayal by an industry she had dedicated her life to mastering. The rejection was not about her talent. It was about her very existence. The old ghosts of Central Falls came rushing back. The feeling of being ugly, unwanted, and inherently less than consumed her all over again. She was staring at a glass ceiling made of deeply entrenched prejudice. Have you ever been told you simply do not belong in the room you worked so hard to enter? Tell me in the comments how you handled it. She was left wondering if she should just accept a life of permanent background obscurity. This was the defining crossroads. She could have easily retreated and accepted the crumbs Hollywood was willing to throw her way. But something inside her finally snapped. It was not naive hope. It was pure, unadulterated rage at a system that dared to tell her she was not enough. She refused to be a cautionary tale of a talented woman crushed by an unfair world. She looked at herself in the mirror and decided to radically accept exactly who she was. If they would not give her a seat at the table, she was going to build her own room. She chose to bet everything on her undeniable raw talent. That fierce internal shift triggered a massive change in how she commanded space. The grind finally started paying off in accelerating, unstoppable waves. A brilliant 8-minute performance in the film Doubt earned her an Academy Award nomination, completely shifting the industry's perception of her power. Small wins began to stack into monumental victories. She took on the lead role in How to Get Away with Murder, tearing down the network television mandate of what a leading lady should look like. She famously removed her wig and makeup on national television, forcing the world to look at her authentic, unvarnished self. People who had once dismissed her were suddenly clamoring to work with her. She won a Tony Award, then an Emmy, and finally an Oscar for Fences. The momentum became a tidal wave. She was not just participating in the industry anymore. She was actively reshaping it, bringing all of her past pain, her hunger, and her truth into every single character she touched. The little girl who used to dig through dumpsters in Central Falls was now being recognized as one of the greatest actors of her generation. Her triumph reached a level of absolute transcendence. In 2023, Viola Davis won a Grammy for the audio recording of her memoir, Finding Me. This completed the legendary Triple Crown of acting and officially made her an EGOT winner. But the real victory was not the golden statues lining her shelf. The true empire she built was the profound transformation of who she became. She went from a terrified, starving child trying to shrink away from the world to a fiercely powerful woman who commands global respect. She founded a production company to create leading roles for people of color, actively reaching back to pull others up the ladder she had so painfully climbed. She uses her massive platform to speak openly about poverty, colorism, and trauma, entirely stripping away the shame that once paralyzed her. She turned her deepest wounds into her greatest weapons. If her story inspired you to keep fighting your own battles, hit subscribe and join our community. She proved that the things the world tells you to hide can actually be the source of your undeniable power. The truth of Viola Davis's ascent is not a sanitized fairy tale about working hard and believing in yourself. It is a brutal, hard-earned revelation. Your deepest shame does not disqualify you from greatness. It is the exact fuel required to build it. She did not succeed by pretending she never scavenged for food in Central Falls, or by hiding the scars of her poverty. She succeeded by dragging all of that pain, all of that hunger, straight into the light and forging it into her art. When you stop running from the ugliest, broken parts of your story and finally start owning them, you strip the world of its power to use them against you. Your unvarnished truth becomes your ultimate weapon. That little girl from Rhode Island who stole scraps just to survive the night did not merely escape her circumstances. She conquered an entire industry by refusing to stay invisible. Now, I want to hear from you. What is one piece of your own past that you used to hide, but now realize makes you unbreakable? Tell me down in the comments, because I read every single one. And if this story reminded you of your own untold power, hit that subscribe button and join our community. We are building something real here. Never forget that the very things that almost destroyed you can become the unshakable foundation of your empire.